Welcome to C-Suite Strategies, the podcast that takes you inside the minds of top executives across diverse industries. I'm your host, Stacie Sussman, Chief Revenue Officer at RevUp Advisory, and I'm here to uncover the strategies, insights, and hidden wisdom that drive success at the highest levels of business. Each episode will dive into a specific topic crucial to scaling a business, exploring the unique challenges and opportunities that shape growth and success. From innovative revenue models to marketing to cutting-edge leadership techniques, we leave no stone unturned. Whether you're a seasoned C-suite executive or a hungry founder seeking more knowledge, this podcast is your backstage pass to the strategies that separate good companies from great ones. Prepare to challenge your assumptions, expand your horizons, and walk away from each episode with actionable insights that can transform your approach to business. Follow now, C-Suite Strategies, and join us as we uncover the secrets to sustainable business growth, one powerful conversation at a time. Your next big breakthrough might just be a listen away. Hey everyone, we're excited to have you back for a new episode of C-Suite Strategies. The topic today is going to be cracking the C-Suite code, what it takes to rise to the top. Our guest here is a longtime professional friend and an awesome person, Conway, co-founder of C&C Talent Partners. Conway and I have known each other for probably a couple of decades now, and he is one of the best in the business to talk about this topic. Conway, so great to have you, and please share a little bit about yourself.
Stacie, thank you so much for having me. Great to be here, everyone. Just a brief introduction on my end, as Stacie alluded to, I have co-founded C&C Talent Partners with a friend and former colleague from Time Warner. We have our own boutique retained search firm where we specialize in senior level recruiting across various functions and across different industries, although our sweet spot industry-wise is media and new media. Before that, I was on the agency side, so I certainly have a lot of experience in executive recruiting, both from the agency as well as client side. So glad to be here and look forward to the conversation with you, Stacie.
Awesome. And I remember the days of meeting you on the streets of New York City when you were at CBS. I feel like you know sort of everyone in the business. I think you're being humble and modest. I feel like you've gone through so much in your career, and I think it's natural to me that you went out on your own with your business partner and started your search firm. So let's just kind of get into it. We're talking C-suites. I think you guys recruit, honestly, I think at the highest level at this point of where you guys are. And you guys work with amazing brands. Like you said, media, new media. I have a background in media too. So I feel like it's interesting to see when you guys place people, who those power players are and who the team was behind the scenes. So talk to me about when a company brings you guys in. What's the need? What are they looking for? And I know you guys work with certain companies. So just talk to me about like, what are they looking for? Or what do they think they're looking for? And then you're reading between the lines. What do you think they're actually looking for at the end of the day?
Yeah, it's a great question, Stacie. It really varies, as you can imagine, client to client, case to case, and situational. So we see a variety of situations where sometimes we're brought in where a client, may not have potentially the confidence in their internal recruiting function and they want to go outside. Sometimes it's political reasons where they have confidence with the internal recruiting function, but they want to make sure that it's an objective process. And so they bring us in and hire. You're right. We do key in on, an old media term's sake for those who come from old media, kind of SVP level and above. And so starting all in packages, $500K to $600K in salary and kind of up north into the seven figures. For instance, we had a situation with a client last year where the internal recruiting function was handling it for about half a year and it wasn't going where they wanted to go. And so we had an existing relationship with this person who's a chief marketing officer of one of the sports leagues. And so she enlisted us to work on a couple SVP level marketing roles reporting into her. So again, it's a variety of different reasons. And sometimes they don't have the time, right? We were working with a company more in the TV and film production space, and they needed someone who would be an SVP of scripted television programming. And there was just such a flood coming in to the president that she enlisted our help to really, help free her up in the market. So again, it really varies case to case and when we're brought in.
Great. So when you're brought in, obviously, by the company at the end of the day, but I think what I hear is relationships are key. And I think that you and your business partner have been at so many different firms and at the highest levels. So not only are companies bringing you in, but are candidates at that levels also coming to you and saying, hey, we love our job, but if you could get me X, Y, and Z, I'd be interested in throwing the hat in the ring, because I think relationships and what you do is just so important.
Yeah, your instincts are right. It's a combination of both. I mean, at the end of the day, our business model, though, is the client and the company, they retain us and pay for us, right? And so if I use that MBA as an example, once they decide to retain us, we're getting a retainer fee, whether we find the person or not, quite candidly, whether it's an internal, whether it's a referral, we're getting economically the same amount. And so once a search goes public, because of our network with over 40 years plus of experience between the two of us, we do have a lot of people coming to us who are either out of a job or looking for a job. But as always, our process is pretty consistent. We sit with a client on the front end. We determine where does this person sit in terms of the competition, and we do the true headhunting. So if it's a sports league, as an example, are the other sports league fair game? Is broader media fair game? What's the function? Where do we go? And then we really canvass the market methodically. If it happens to be that people and candidates approach us, it can fit there in our strategy, great. But if not, it's really about making sure we kind of map out the universe while finding the right successful candidate. So it's definitely a blend, but more of the time is spent trying to understand, strategically speaking, here are the 10 companies we're going to break down. Here's what we're going to go after. Whether we get them or not, we're going to tell you a story, give you market feedback. Maybe they're under contract in the media space and they're not gettable. Or maybe they're in contract, they are gettable because their boss will let them out, or there's a merger going on and they're going to be set free. So we do have a lot of people coming and looking for the job, but more of our job, quite honestly, in an ideal world, is we're proactively going after the person who's not looking for the job.
Got it. And talk to me about the company, we'll just say, is looking for that SVP of marketing example, and they think they need sort of a checklist of, X, Y, and Z. But you guys are like, yes, you need X, Y, and Z, but you also need sort of ABC over here. Talk to me about what that process looks like, because I feel like we talk about those are kind of the reason why they hire you at the end of the day. And those are kind of the hard conversations that you have to bring to the client sometimes to say, you are looking for this kind of person, but have you thought about these functions or these titles, or this is part of the job scope and you're not even thinking about it?
Yeah, I think that, this has been said often in the past by many other people, but as simple as complex as it is, culture and fit are very, very important. So I often joke with clients that, listen, finding someone who can do this job for you, that's easy, not a problem. The hard part and the challenge and the opportunity and the consultation is who can do that job, and there's not what I call organ rejection, where everyone checks the box. Let's just say it's a sales executive. They've increased revenue from X to Y, what you wanted to do. They came from the right industry. They came from the right competition. But do they burn bridges in the process? Do they piss people off, quite candidly? Do they not play nice in the sandbox? And that really matters, because the more senior you go, people blow up more often than I've seen because they're not a culture fit. They've got the hard skills. They can produce results. And time again, I've seen it where companies take a quote unquote chance on someone, turn a blind eye to, they don't build relationships, they burn bridges, but they knocked it out of the park, and they have. But that gets old in organizations, and it affects the rest of the clubhouse, where people look at an organization to hold them accountable and say, excuse my French, you let this asshole in here. They're demeaning, they're condescending, they're patronizing, but you decided to let them in. And so the conversations a lot often with the client is like opening their eyes to the trade-offs between what they may get, but what the risk is. And the risk often is associated with things we see in their personality. And that is, we see that through the interview process as we get to know a candidate, but we also do the due diligence and get the intel, both formal and informal. And that's part of what we bring to the table is what is the listed references usually give glowing remarks, but often not all the time, quite candidly. You'd be surprised actually that they don't give the best references all the time. And that's an art in itself and really getting to the bottom of the reference. And then you realize if this is the person they portrayed as the best they have, that really wasn't that good. And so that becomes a delicate conversation and how you explain that to the client and make sure they understand there are always going to be trade-offs in candidates. So having that conversation truthfully and transparently is what, I like to think we bring to the table to open the eyes for the clients.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I work with smaller businesses here at RevUp Advisory, but I see that also. It's like, is this person a culture fit? And I often find when we're working with the C-suite, the CMOs, the CROs, they came from big companies, let's say like a HubSpot or a Salesforce, and now they're going more towards a smaller company and they have to get their hands dirty. And I've gotten the response where it's like, well, I used to have a marketing team that did that, or I had a BI team that did that, or I had a systems person that did that. And it's just like, hey, well, you came to a small business, you took a more cushy salary, or maybe they got equity and they're planning to sell it and go public, but they can't actually roll up their sleeves, I'll say, and get their hands dirty. And I feel like it's a misalignment on the culture fit or the expectations of what the role is. And usually we're a team that comes in to help aid that, to get the hands dirty. But I'm always like, well, how did they hire you? How did they think this was a good fit?
Well, they get enamored with the shiny object. And I've seen exactly what you just alluded to, Stacie, which is a lot of what the trend we're seeing is PE-backed ventures value, quote unquote, the gray hair. Someone's got big media, new media experience. And there is a market for those executives in a good way, but they need to be very careful for these firms that are 20, 50, 100 people. We had a client last year who, happened to be an A-lister, Hollywood actor and director, startup mode, wanted a COO, and made sure on the front end that he communicated, don't want that corner in the office executive who is doing work through everyone else. But 2 months into the search, he referenced someone who was that corner person in the office. And it was like, what do you really want?
Right.
Because that person actually, a lot of skills, but that is the big media in the corner office to roll up their sleeves and get dirty. That's not going to be your person. So I've seen emotions kind of get the best of clients sometime when they're trying to figure things out on behalf of their business.
Yeah. And I do feel bad for some of these, I would say, like that SVP or C-suite levels for the businesses we work with that I'll say are like sub 50 million in ARR, that they're brought in to do this sometimes Herculean challenge. They think they're ready for it. They have the budgets. They bring in other teams. They bring in other people, but they can't do it. One, I think, because it's not a culture fit. Or I think, two, I have seen where they sometimes just come the fall, I'll say guy or girl, like the company is not always set up to grow from 10 million to 50 million in the next like 2 to 3 years.
Right.
And then this CRO or CMO is coming in to kind of hold the bag. And then we work with them for years, sometimes at a time, where it's like, I don't know if it's you at the end of the day. I almost think the company isn't set up to meet these P or VC-backed expectations, because we do a lot of board decks and numbers crunching at the end of the day. I also feel bad for some of these people because I get to know them really intimately, that they're not set up for success. And I think that's a big conversation that also happens too, is like, as the candidate, ask the right questions to make sure you're going to be able to be successful in the role, in the culture, etc.
Well, I think that is an incredibly important point, I think, to highlight. It really is a two-way street. The candidate should always feel empowered, and it's their responsibility to do their homework and do their due diligence on a leader, on an organization. And oftentimes you see the candidate enamored with a shiny object. Oh, that's company X. I want to protect the innocent. I don't want to highlight any companies and ruffle any feathers here on this podcast. But they then don't do as much homework as they should, and they really should. And I think that one of the trends that I've seen out there is, and I think everyone has, is the word scale. And I think scale is completely overhyped. Everyone says, well, have they scaled? Have they scaled? Has a candidate scaled? We need to scale. Our business model needs to scale. And
that's why we're in business, Conway.
to date myself, it's like digital experience 15 years ago. I need digital experience. I don't need just linear. I need digital in the media, new media space. It's like, well, the chicken or the egg. Well, at some point, the company needs to take a risk on someone who's got the skills, the competencies to then take their skills and apply it to the quote unquote new world back in the day of digital.
Yes.
And I feel the same with scale. It's overhyped. It's overused. I think some of the companies, it's obvious what they want on a scale. They want to make revenue and grow that and build infrastructure. But how you get there, people can do that without quote unquote having exactly done it before. So I think that's an overhyped trend, at least in my opinion, that I see out there still.
Yeah, I think PE firms over-index. I want to say I have this debate in my head of hard skills versus soft skills. And so in hard skills, I'm thinking it's like, oh, we grew this company to hundreds of millions, or we took a team of 500 and grew it to 5,000, like the numbers on paper. Because I think, honestly, if I'm PE firms, they run it through some sort of modeling and it's like, check, did they do this? Did they do that? Okay. Green flag, like they'll be a good candidate. But what I find people under index, which I personally think is so important, I just saw a post about this on LinkedIn this morning, is the soft skills. That can they work with other people? Are they going to be in a boardroom? Can they tell a compelling story? Can you put them in front of Hollywood actors and actresses or whoever, and they're not going to get flabbergasted, they're not going to get flustered, and they're going to remain cool, or shit's going to hit the fan. We all know it at the company. And how do they kind of move through those obstacles versus do they just blow up and start screaming at everyone? I work my days at Condé Nast, so I've seen my fair share of stories. So I don't know. What's your take on that? Because I think, like you said, people want to see scale. So to me, that's like the numbers to prove it. But there's so many other factors, which I think are soft skills. But I just don't think they know how to run that through like quantum data modeling at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that, one of the important skills, regardless of the company, regardless of the industry, are navigation skills. Those who know how to read a room better and have strong navigation skills, tend to be more successful. They roll with the punches. They're adaptable. They're flexible in the face of adversity, whether it's a merger, integration efforts, layoffs, navigating the room, knowing when to hold, knowing when to fold with your boss or with other departments when you're in a cross-functional situation with no authority and no accountability, but need to work with people. Those soft skills, I agree, do become important because that's where people find out, organizations find out what their leaders are made of. But those who have the stronger navigation skills typically are more successful. And there's a certain degree of patience, I would say, that is needed out there too, which it's a whole different topic on generational talent, right? Like I think, I don't know the exact demographics, right? But there's 5 different generations by age in the workforce, right? From Gen Xers to baby boomer to millennials to Zs, and they all have their characteristics and traits, and how they all interface, I think, will remain a topic of conversation for a while to come. But that patience is not there by a lot of the generations, but in different ways. It could be one's career aspirations, how long they give a company for return on what they think they bring to the table, but also I've often counseled executives after I've hired them where they might be a little frustrated. And I said, you're going to come in here and you're going to know what to change to make things better. You're going to want to do it. You're going to have the tools to do it, but the organization may not be ready for it.
Yeah.
So instead of trying to have your list of 10 things to move the needle on 2 of the 10 points and you're a hero. But if you try to move that 5th point, they might be like, who is this guy or gal who's ruffling feathers? I'm not ready for it. I didn't know them personally, but I'll cite this example, and you'll remember this in the industry, Stacie. But years ago, I was at the old AOL Time Warner, 9 different operating units.
Yep.
businesses running from once upon a time, Time Warner Cable to Time Inc. to Warner Music Group to Turner to Warner Brothers. And each division had a very strong culture. But Time Inc. at one point, they typically always promoted from within. And they went outside and they brought in an outsider from, at the time, Meredith. I'll mention his name because I didn't know him personally. Jack Griffin, I believe was his name. And from what I heard, because I was West Coast based at that time, he was pissing people off, trying to make changes at Time Inc. You're talking about a culture that had a Scotch cart every Friday afternoon being pushed around for executives and then some. And by all accounts, he really blew up. But if you look back at history, it begs a question. Did he blow up because he was not positioned for success? Because there were so many incumbents in senior level positions at the venerable Time Inc. that they weren't ready for him. And I always like to say strength in numbers. He may have hypothetically gotten in there, saw what needed to be done, went to make the changes. They weren't ready for it, and he got blown out. But was he blown out because he didn't have the skills, or was he blown out because he didn't have enough allies? And it's a good question. I don't know the full answer, but I know that from what I've seen, if you try to push too many agenda items to be successful out of that 10 I mentioned an example, then people do get blown out. And it's hard to explain to someone who's been successful for 2 decades plus or 15 years plus in their career. It's frustrating because they're like, I know what to do. I have a playbook. I know how to implement. I know how to execute. Let me do this.
Right.
But a lot of time when I've seen organizations are not ready for them to do it, or it's got to be at a pace that's much slower than the individual is capable of doing and wants to do.
Yeah. And now, a word from our sponsor, RevUp Advisory. At RevUp Advisory, we're passionate about transforming businesses. Most B2B companies struggle with scaling, but with us, you're guaranteed to maximize your marketing and sales growth because it's literally all we do every day. We know you've already accomplished some amazing things, but we also know what got you here won't get you to where you want to go. When the messy middle of scaling feels overwhelming, we dive in, we clean it up, and we create true business transformation. Our job is to handle the nitty-gritty details that get you there, allowing you to focus on the bigger picture. Led by Stacie Sussman, with over 25 years of expertise in sales, marketing, and operations, our team of business strategists and technical wizards are ready to carve the right growth path forward for your company. Ready to rev up your business? Contact Stacie Sussman at RevUp Advisory today. You're making me think of so many things. Our kind of paths are parallel, although we do just different things. What I hear back is change management, which I feel like we at RevUp Advisory do a lot because we're implementing new processes and systems and foundational structure. And it is a very delicate balance as to what the CMO, CRO wants to do and what the company is willing to do. I think that's huge. I run with very high velocity teams that are more nimble and smaller. So I think they're willing to do it in a quicker time. But I think that brings me to flexibility, right? Like you hire these leaders because theoretically they know how to get you from point A to Z. But it's just like you said, they may only be able to get to E, F, but the leader can get you to Z, but the company is not ready for it. And then I do think, although we do strategy at the end of the day, operationally, sales, marketing, tactics, there's a big culture component that I think you've touched on and probably you guys highlight more as you're putting candidates into companies and you're being retained and hired by the companies is it has to be a culture fit at the end of the day. I worked at Daily Mail and we had a CRO, John Steinberg, absolutely brilliant, one of the most brilliant minds I worked with in the industry. And he had this idea to start this TV show and he wanted to do this whole thing. And Daily Mail said no, because exactly what you said, he did not have the internal allies and buy-in. He ended up parting ways with the company, ended up starting Cheddar, which is exactly what he pitched to Daily Mail. And Daily Mail really could have had the money to do it. And they said no. He went out and did it and sold it to one of the big cable companies. And now I hear he's off doing something new with a media company called Future, which is a new wave media company. But he had the brilliance and the foresight to be like, this could be like a blockbuster for you guys if only you want to do it. But they weren't willing to go for it at the end of the day.
Well, I'm reminded by a story of this executive who was at Facebook at the time, and we're recruiting him into a sales role at CBS. And we liked how he had a blend of earlier experience in media, then went to quote unquote new media at Facebook. We're looking to bring in the CBS. And to his credit, he put me on the firing line and said, Conway, is CBS willing to change? He's like, I got to tell you, people go to the meetings at CBS and they're seeing these people in suits and ties, they don't want to do business with them.
Yeah.
It's like, I need to understand that they're going to change the culture. Or if I'm brought in, that I'm going to be empowered to be able to move the needle because people don't want to do business with them. They're stiff. They're like the old guard, and they may be proud of that, but that doesn't fit into where we're looking to go in this economy. And we brought him on, and he was able successfully to kind of move the needle with respect to culture. But, that was not, hey, I'd love to come in. It was like, I'd like to come in, but I need to understand certain things are going to be in place to make sure I'm positioned and the business is positioned for success and evolution. And that's a smart, healthy conversation, I think, on the front end before any candidate and company, agree that it's a right fit.
Yeah, it's so big. Our favorite at RevUp Advisory is working with what I call legacy companies. They've been around for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and they've grown and they've sort of petered, but they haven't had that like hockey stick growth that the VC and PE are looking for. But I find the VC and PE are looking at numbers that are Xing at just unrealistic numbers where they're just like, we don't need to X at 30. We just need like a 7 or 15X. And like, we'd hit it out of the ballpark. And like, we come in and help those companies. And it's so rewarding to be able to do that in partnership with the companies at the end of the day, because they have high expectations. They're reaching for the stars, but it's possible. I sometimes find when you're bringing in outside capital, they have 100 of these and they're hoping for one home run or grand slam at the end of the day. So they don't care about the other 99 at the end of the day.
That's right.
And then we're going to almost conclude the episode, but I just have 1 or 2 more questions for you. Talk to me about the age old. I feel like we've been swinging a lot on the sort of DEI conversation. It swung. It was heavily on that, then it wasn't heavily on that. Where does the market kind of stand these days on that? And I mean, I know there's a push on my end. I see there's been a push for, getting women on boards. I think it's a slow grind, but there's a push there. And I've seen some articles of women that are on boards. Well, your next hire either could be a woman or it has to have some diversity to the board. What does that look like from a candidate perspective these days?
I think your tone, I would agree with, which I think in some respects, things change, but they stay the same is the way I would kind of sum that up.
Yeah, I agree.
There's still definitely a conversation. I would say that ironically, after a couple of decades on the client side and big corporations and really being at the center and the leadership spot of diversity in every way, right? Whether by gender, by experience, by ethnicity, and other variables. On the vendor side, having my own firm the last 3 years plus, ironically, it's not as much of a conversation, to be honest with you, which has surprised me. It's almost like, hey, we paid a vendor, just get us the best person. Now, philosophically, my partner and I, we want to provide a diverse slate for business reasons across the way to make sure there's not groupthink. And it's, you look at the dynamics, right? So if we're doing a search for a CHRO who happens to be a female, and let's just say she has 5 direct reports, and we're working on the 6th direct report, and 5 are female, well, we don't want to show her 6 female shortlist candidates. We could,
right.
But on purpose, we're going to, in order to have diversity in the business conversation, gender in this finite example will be something we take a good look at to make sure that we give options to our hiring manager. So it's not as much of a code red conversation as it was probably 3 years ago. And again, on the vendor side, it's not as much of a conversation. We almost bring it up proactively under the business context, which I think is the right one. You don't want to have groupthink, as basic as that sounds. So,
Yeah.
and also you see the groupthink more in certain industries. My experience skews more media and new media, but in traditional media, which you know firsthand as well, Stacie, like the groupthink is real.
Yeah.
And trying to go counter to the strongest voice in the room is risky at times. And so you want to fill that room with, different voices and opinions as best possible. So still a conversation, but it ebbs and it flows.
Yeah, no, I agree. Our clients are typically men, I'll say. And I also think it's very specific on titles. We work with a lot of folks on the sales side. It typically is geared towards one profile. It's typically a male, but we have worked with tons of female leaders in sales. And then I do find, for some reason on the marketing side, I do think it skews a little bit more female at the end of the day. But we are typically in a room with a lot of the same kind of people at the end of the day, for better or for worse. And then I think me being a woman that runs Rev Up Advisory bring a little bit of diversity. But I think, like you're saying, at the end of the day, they're hiring us for our experience and their expertise. They're not hiring for who we are or what we look like kind of in the room. It's can we hold our own in the room, and can we have the hard conversations that move the needle forward to get them to the revenue numbers that they're looking to get to. And that's all they care about.
Right. The numbers don't lie, as they say.
Yeah, the numbers don't lie. Awesome. Is there anything else that you don't think that we've touched on today that you wanted to bring up or talk about? I feel like this has been such a good conversation. I think you guys are recruiting kind of at the highest level. I think there's so many conversations that are had in order to get the right candidate in place. Anything else or trends or anything you're hopeful or excited for 2025? I personally think that it's going to be a really interesting year. Obviously, new president that has come in early 2025, but I think a lot of businesses need help, whether it's recruiting, whether it's sales and marketing or operationally. And I do really think it's going to be a good year for folks as they're going to be reaching out to hire vendors like us that are going to need that help. And I think people are willing to recognize that these days.
Yeah, I think there's a question you had shared with me in advance of this that maybe I can end on this, but the question was, what's the boldest move an aspiring leader can make to break into the C-suite, which I'm sure is top of mind for a lot of people. A piece of advice I would share is really be bold and knock on the door of the C-suite directly. Too many times what I've seen are people are passive about how they maybe get to the C-suite. And so I would say go after it proactively. Let me give you two examples. One, I'll share on myself. I was at Time Warner, the old Time Warner, about 10 years. I was in Los Angeles. My wife happens to be from Canada. My son was born there. No offense to those who are from the West Coast, but I didn't want to raise a child in Los Angeles, so I wanted to get back to the East Coast. And I had my spreadsheet of my job search. And essentially, I had this company, CBS and the CHRO, Tony Ambrosio, just on that spreadsheet, probably for months. I had a day job, so I didn't have time to look for a job. But one day I said to myself, you know what? CBS is in the media space. I don't know Tony directly. He's a CHRO for Les Moonves at the time at CBS. And so I cold called him. I emailed him, and I can't remember exactly when he got back to me, but if I had to bet the over under and set the line at 1 hour, I would bet the under. Like, he got back to me right away. And that first outreach 6 months later led to a job heading up recruiting for CBS Interactive, then the digital arm for CBS in San Francisco. And then ironically, years later, when I was catching up with Tony, I think we had both left CBS. He had shared with me a story where he was on a business trip. Viacom and CBS had two different heads of HR. There's maybe going to be a merger. This was round one many years ago. And he went to the CEO and lobbied for himself. I mean that in a polite way, in case this podcast gets to Tony at some point. But what I took away from it is like, you know what? He saw something he wanted, which was he had competition for who would be the last standing CHRO. He got along with the CEO.
Yep.
He pulled the CEO aside at an offsite event, having a cocktail, and made it known that I want to be your person. And so, bold moves for aspiring leaders to break in. Don't be passive, be proactive, knock on the door. The worst thing that can happen is you don't get what you want, you don't get in the door, but take matters into your own hand. And I would also end with that also translate to one's job search, right? Like a lot of times there's different ways people go on the job search, and it's very different. It's interesting to see how different they are, even for executives that I've interacted with. But what I share with people is make sure you put together a list of your 5 to 10 top companies as part of your job search and knock on the door directly. And even if you don't get a response, that is a response, right? And so ultimately, if you take that job with company X, at least know what happened at A, B, C, D, and E. You have no regrets. And again, it might be you knocked on the door and heard no response, but that's fine. So be proactive and knock on the door directly would be the advice I would share with people.
I love that. You made me think of my New York Magazine days where I was selling classified ads in the back of the magazine, and I wanted to work as the fashion director in sales, and there was someone there. And I went to the publisher and the associate publisher's office, and I was like, I want to work on your team. Will you have breakfast with me? And like, no. Finally, they said yes. And then eventually I got to be the fashion and beauty sales director. But I made some bold moves at asking these publishers out for breakfast and coffee when I'm in my 20s. And I was just like, what do I have to lose?
Well, and Stacie, one of the things that you touched on, I forgot to mention, but it's a great point, is you knocked on the door of the publisher, right? And so in that business, who's the top sales executive? It's the publisher.
Yeah.
So go to the top, because you go to the top, they may be making changes, either growing out a department or making a change, quite honestly, to let someone go. And then they see you as a solution potentially. Then they make a move. But were you not to come and knock on their door, they don't know they have a solution. So by going to the top of the food chain, so to speak, that's the right approach, because, everyone may have a friend who's in a similar level, but they're kind of your competition, even though they're your friend. So You go to the thought leader who can make the changes, whether it's additions or replacements. And that's well played, Stacie.
Yeah, that was one of my boldest moves, and that changed my whole career. So I love that story. Thanks for reminding me of that. Awesome. How can people find you? How can people hire your company? How can people get in touch with you guys?
So thanks for asking. So listen, LinkedIn, I'm on LinkedIn. Conway Shui, Shui is the last name. And I would say that, if anyone's out there looking for an alternative solution to the usual suspect search firms, feel free to knock on our door. We're very transparent. It's one of our values. If we're not the right firm, we'll let you know that. Or if we don't have bandwidth, we'll let you know that as well. But you can also reach me on my work email at conway@cctalentpartners, that's plural.com. But Stacie, thanks very much for having me. This was a lot of fun and appreciate it.
Thank you. We will put that information in our show notes so you guys can have the correct spelling of all that. Some of the best and brightest in the business right here. So you should definitely be knocking on their doors. It was great having everyone on C-Suite Strategies. I hope you guys stuck it out till the end because we had some really good nuggets for you. And thanks for listening. As we wrap up this episode of C-Suite Strategies, I want to express my sincere gratitude to you, our listeners, for tuning in and engaging with our podcast. Your commitment to business growth and operational excellence is what drives this podcast forward. A special thank you to our guests today for sharing their valuable business insights and experience. Your wisdom is a gift to our audience, and we're honored to have had you on our show today. If you enjoyed this episode, we'd be thrilled if you follow and subscribe to the podcast. Your help supports us to reach more ambitious business leaders just like you. And if you didn't enjoy it, well, I guess I'll see you never. This is your host, Stacie Sussman, Chief Revenue Officer at RevUp Advisory, signing off.